The Lead. Sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Greg Tinker for The Lead, and honored to have today with us Steve Hudson, who is known to everybody in this area because of his years of being a golf pro and all the way back to his dad being the pro at Musgrove, Travis Hudson. Steve, welcome to the set today. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
And we want to start there. Actually, we want to start back in your early days in Farmstead.
Yeah, love that.
I know that's where you grew up.
Yeah.
And your dad, of course, was the pro at Musgrove. Talk a little bit about those early years and your dad's influence on you.
Yeah, so Dad was at Curry High School, of course, and basketball and football. So I was born in '57, and so he was there up until the spring of '65. So I wasn't big enough to run around like my older brother Tab was, but I ran around with him, and they'd go to games, and they'd let me get on the bus every now and then. So that's my earliest memories of, Dad and watching him coach these young men. And he had some good teams and had some good players. And so those are wonderful memories going to Curry. And so obviously we went to Farmstead, and it was a wonderful school. Bert Richardson was the principal. And just looking back, it was such a nurturing environment looking back. Farmstead, FDR in 1933, they had these programs all across the country. Of course, you're in the middle of the Depression, and the Farmstead was actually, it's called Bankhead Farms, and you had to be a tenant farmer, and you literally could buy land from the government. Actually, the government would give you money, so they could buy a house, a farmstead cottage, and there's still a lot of them in Farmstead. And so the tenant farmers, you had to do that. That was one of the requirements for you to have the opportunity to buy and build a house and get maybe 10 to 17 acres to farm. And so there was 100 of those houses done that. So it was a planned community, and they did this all over the country. And so they were trying to create this great little world. Mainly, they wanted the farmers, right, because people needed to eat, and they had trouble. So they were feeding the neighborhood. And of course, they had a church. They had clubs. You had to meet, and they had certain rules that you had to do to be part of that community. So it was really neat. So it started out in a kind of a time that people needed each other. So it was a great community. So Farmstead, I remember going to the first grade, and I was scared to death leaving my mom. I was the middle child. Pam had gone, Tab had gone, and so I remember going and went to the first grade. Mrs. Humphreys was the first grade teacher, and I was scared. I wouldn't leave my mom, but I looked over there and saw some cousins, and all of a sudden I said, okay, this will be all right. So just going up through, and then of course Rex Williams was a big buddy of mine, and he and I played sports a lot. And when we were in the 6th grade, we got to play up on the 7th grade team. And we also we went down, he did it when he was 9 and 10, but we went and played on the Jasper Travelers. I was 11 and 12, that was a little football team. And we traveled around the county. And they were undefeated, they're 9th and 10, they're 9-year-old and 10-year-old, and then we were undefeated the 11th and 12th, 11 and 12 years old. So we did sports together there. And so we did that through Farmstead. We had some great coaches. Coach Good was there, that's very well known in the area, and just was a wonderful man. And so we played for him. And one of my favorite stories of Farmstead was that Coach Good was still, I don't know if he's getting his master's or what it was, but he was doing school still at night. And so it was the 7th grade county championship. And so he went to my dad, and so this is when I was really the first time coached, especially in basketball, by him. And so Coach Good went to Dad and said, hey, I can't make all these games if we go to play the county tournament. He said, can you coach the team? And Dad said, yeah, I can do that. And he got Tony Lee, his buddy, to help him do it. And so everybody knows Mr. Tony Lee. And so we go and play. And first practice, Dad comes and he's wearing a referee shirt, football pants, and a referee hat, some type of cap. And the first practice we had, he made us put the balls up. We're all out there shooting. We put the balls up, and he had us show us how our plays. We had to run our plays for him without the ball. And after the practice, my buddy said, "Your dad's crazy." He's like, what's he doing? So, but we went on. So we won every game. We played Eldridge in the final, and they had a really good team. And Scooter Lightsey was on it, and we won by 2 points. And Scooter, he was a real good rebounder. He didn't shoot a lot, but they fouled him, and he made 2 free throws for us to win the game and the county championship in the second round. So that was a neat, and doing that with Dad. And then we had Coach George Miller, and he was incredible. You know, he believed in us, you know, so much. So it was such a wonderful, nurturing environment. Of course, we had a football team that they put together, probably when I was in the 7th grade. So we had fun doing that too.
So at some point along the way, you played those sports and moved on to high school. When did you know that golf was going to be your sport?
So that's another thing. I'm telling stories about Dad, but you ask about
Sure,
how I've been
yeah.
influenced by him. But so we were at the club, and we worked hard at the club. We're picking up range balls, and Tab worked a lot in the shop, and we cut grass. And Dad came to me and Tab one time, and eventually Philip, our little brother, and he put his arm around us and looked out across the course. He said, "You know, see all that pretty grass out there?" He said, "It needs to be cut." And he says, "You guys can learn to cut a lot of grass, or you can learn to play golf." So we chose golf.
That was a good choice,
Yeah,
wasn't
he
it?
knew how to motivate you.
Sure.
But so I played, so we had the football and basketball, obviously. And I even played baseball downtown at James Fowler Field one year by Bull Building Supply was our sponsor. And so I played and did that one summer, but that did interfere with golf. So I only did that for one summer, and working at the club,
Sure.
it interfered with. So, but in high school, of course, I played other sports than golf. So I played basketball and football. And Larry Blakeney was our coach at Walker High School. And he and Coach Green, he was the basketball coach. And they didn't, you know, they recruit players now like crazy, right? But back then we did have Coach Green and Coach Blakeney came to Farmstead and talked to me and Rex. We're going like, wow, because you could go to Curry or Farmstead.
Sure.
We had all that tradition up there. And my old Pam and Tab had gone to Walker. In my mind, I'm going to Walker as well. But Coach Miller left our 9th grade year from Farmstead and went to Curry. And we loved him. And so he wanted us to go to Curry.
Sure.
So they came, and it was recruiting. Looking back at it, they came to recruit us, you know, made us some promises. "Steve, you're going to be our starting guard," you know, as a 10th grader. And Rex, and obviously the football side of it. And Coach Blakeney did tell me, he says, "I know you play golf. You don't have to do spring or summer practice if you come to Walker." And I was like, whoa, okay, that was nice. So we went to Walker and we played. Rex didn't play his senior year, but he didn't play basketball. But I did, and I look back, I mean, I was in pretty good shape because literally, you know, you would do, now I didn't do summer where they had to practice. I would go in on Monday that school started after our last golf tournament, and it was full speed. They threw pads on me, and I was supposed to be running, you know, and getting in shape, and I did some, but you can't get in shape for people knocking you all over the place.
Sure.
I was I could barely walk that whole first week, and so 10th grade year I didn't start that first game, but I ended up starting maybe the 3rd or 4th game or something and playing. But I remember in the 11th grade, I came on Monday and I played in the game on Friday. And so looking back, you know, I can see where maybe I never felt it, but they've been spring practice and then summer, and I come in on Monday and but they never, you know, said anything about that. So I did that, and so you'd go from football, right? You know, Friday night game, end of the season. You'd go to basketball Monday, and they'd been practicing already. So I would throw up those first 2 or 3 practices in basketball. Football shape's different than basketball
Absolutely.
shape.
Sure.
You know, running suicides or whatever, running laps around the gym, but you just don't stop.
Right.
And in football, I was in shape, but whatever, you run 30 yards and come back and rest for a little bit. So we'd do the basketball, and then that would end, and then we'd do golf.
So you had success enough to get an offer or two for college and ended up at Alabama.
Yeah. So I liked LSU. I liked their colors. I remember that. And I met a couple of guys that were talking about going there. So I was in communication with them and had some interest. Even Alexander City Junior College at the time, Maxie Bowles was a big recruiter, and he came and really wanted me to come there. But it was all, Tab was played at Alabama, and Coach Railing had shown some interest. So to me, there really was never an option.
Right.
So I wasn't pursuing a lot of the other schools at all. So, and back then they didn't come after you necessarily so hard because, I mean, they were getting players. Coach Railing would recruit people from up north, but most of the players at that time were within a certain circumference or radius of, their school.
Yeah. So you went to Alabama and led the team in 1979 to the first SEC championship. Talk a little bit about that if you want to.
Okay. I led the team. Probably the only thing I led them to was probably the buffet line because we had some good players, and I was fourth and fifth player. You played 5 players. And so Cecil Lingham and I were sophomores. So we had 3 players, and Cecil was a good player. He played higher than 4 and 5 some. But so I was on the team, and we went and played, and we'd had a pretty good season. But we went and played well. It was actually at Pine Tree in Birmingham Country Club, which had been a neat place for me. I look back, I did win their junior invitational at Pine Tree. Then I won their invitational a couple times, and then won the SEC championship there. So that's always been a special spot for me, maybe in some of the golf that I played there. So, but it was obviously we all got a ring for the SEC championship, but was tickled and fortunate to be on one of the top 5, but I didn't lead them.
Well, being a part of that, because championships are hard to win, right? I mean, an SEC championship, no matter what sport you're in, that's difficult to do. And being a part of that and having the ring, I guess, to prove that means a lot still today, right?
Yeah, it does. And the other thing that always happened is that they used to have the All-SEC Sports Trophy, which I don't even know if they do anymore. But golf was the last sport. And so Coach Bryant, he loved golf and played a lot of it. And he used to come up and hang out a lot at Musgrove with Ellis Taylor and the guys. And, but it sometimes, even though we'd win the SEC in football or whatever and finish wherever in basketball, but it would come down where we would, if the wrong team won after Coach Bryant had won the SEC football championship, if we didn't beat them, he wasn't going to win that sports. And that was very important to him, all the sports, being able to beat all the other schools. And so there's quite a few stories. One of them was Jerry Pate. My brother Tab was playing with him. And all we had to do was, I think they may have had to, if they would have won, Jerry Pate, I think he 3-putted the last hole. He went for the first putt because he was going to win the individual title. This might not be exactly right, but Jerry did something, and they said he was trying to win the individual title, and he messed up, and then they finished second, and we missed winning the all-sports trophy. Now, I'm sure Jerry don't remember that, but that's that story.
Sure.
And but it meant a lot to Coach Bryant. I mean, I think he literally was at that finishing round, when they were playing. So there was always a little pressure there, and you knew that, oh my goodness, now you're letting down all the other sports if you don't get the points you need to.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit about the connection here, because you had the opportunity to associate with one of the greatest coaches of all times, Bear Bryant, and now you have an association with Nick Saban. So you're in a unique position to have a perspective of both of those guys. So let's talk first of all any sort of memory you may have of Coach Bryant, and then we'll, in a little bit, once we work through your professional years of golf, we'll come back, circle around to your interaction and your association with Coach Saban now, but
Okay.
Coach Bryant, any particular story that I mean, everybody wants to know if you knew, anybody who had anything to do with Coach Bryant, tell the favorite Coach Bryant story kind of thing.
Okay. So he loved to play golf. So he had spare time every now and then, and he'd come out to the university course, and we'd sit there and tee his balls up for him, and Coach Redling, we made sure to treat him the best we possibly could, but it was kind of an honor to tee his balls up, because everybody wanted to do it. So we would rotate and take turns, and he'd sit there and he'd talked about, and he, so younger, obviously, was my first memories, but Dad was, good friends with him. Dad having been a football, basketball coach, and Dad was chosen to be, they used to have the All-Stars, North and South All-Stars, and it was in Tuscaloosa, and Coach Bryant was involved and had dinner with him and stuff like that. But so Dad was involved with him from his coaching at Curry those years, and then being the club pro at Musgrove Country Club, and Coach Bryant coming up and having good friends there, they became good friends, and Dad would give him lessons. And so one time he left something at Musgrove, and Tab, he was old enough to drive or whatever, so they had Tab drive it to him, and so he took it and delivered it, to his house and everything, and he gave him two $2 bills, and he signed them, and he said, he said, "Here, Tab," he says, "here's a $2 bill for you," and he says, "and give him one to Steve too." And the other thing that kind of blew my mind is when I was young, and even when I was college, and I'd tee his ball up, he'd ask how my parents were. He was great, right, with the whole parent thing or whatever. But he said my mom's name was Ida Mae, and so he said, "How's your dad doing? How's Ida Mae doing?" I'm going like, "How do you know my mom, Ida Mae?" She goes, "Went by Mae," and so I was always blown away that he knew that. Well, I ended up reading, years later, that his mother's name was Ida Mae. Is kind of what I remembered, and I said, "Oh, okay," so that made it a little bit easier for him. So that was always a neat memory. That he was always, he had that skill, and you mentioned Coach Saban. Coach Bryant connected with you, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And just all the personal things that he did. And I also remember him because he brought Joe Namath. After Joe had gone to the Jets, he came and played at Musgrove a couple different times. And Joe had green and white tees with his name on them. And I tell him this story every time I get to see him some. And he says, "I love hearing that story." He said, "But I know what you're going to say." He's like, but I still have one of the green and white tees that I got from him on the 18th green at Musgrove, because we would just, that's at that time, I don't know, he felt bigger to me than Coach Bryant,
Sure. Well, he was
Hollywood
Broadway Joe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Everybody kind of knew who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of folks may not have known that Coach Bryant spent that much time at Musgrove, and then to bring in other folks with him like that, really a pretty remarkable thing for our town, right?
Yeah. And Jasper has always been, I still say it, it's the biggest little town I've ever heard of. It seemed, been fortunate to travel some in different races. And my wife and I, Karen, who grew up in Washington area, sweethearts, were senior in high school. We went to South Africa. I played professionally over there, and literally, met somebody that asked me about Jasper, Alabama. I said I was from Alabama, and he said, "You know where Jasper is?" And I go like, "Well, that's where I grew up." And we got to go to Ireland for my wife's 60th birthday party, and we met this couple that my wife had met online, because one of her cousins had written a book over there, and she became kind of a famous little lady, and Karen wanted to go see her home and everything. She had passed away. So this lady that Karen met online, we sit down to have breakfast, before we go on the tour that she's going to take us on. And we're sitting there, so me and her husband are talking, and they're talking or whatever, and tell them where we're from. I said, "Well, where are you from?" I said, "Well, southern United States, And he said, "Whereabouts?" And I said, "Alabama." And he says, "You know where Jasper, Alabama is?" I go, "Yes, sir." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, we bought somebody's house from Jasper, Alabama over here in Ireland." And I said, "John Oliver?" I knew John Oliver had a house over there. And he goes, "Yes, John Oliver." We're sitting there in Ireland, having breakfast with somebody, and it quickly goes back to Jasper.
So the 6 degrees of separation really is a true thing, right?
Especially in the golf world, it's
Yeah.
definitely smaller.
So that's a good segue into you graduate Alabama and you have a chance to play professionally. And I know that spans, all kinds of things. You've been, I guess, played golf on about every continent and all across the United States, of course. But do you have in all of those years a kind of favorite experience? And I know that's, we're talking about 40 years of golf there, but as you think through your professional career, are there things that stand out more than others?
I would say that, professionally, I did play for 6 years. The thing that stands out most about that, Larry Drummond was my sponsor. And so I didn't have that very successful a professional career. I really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the mini tours. I never got my big tour card.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'd win some money and had to carry us for a couple of months or whatever, then, go see Larry. He'd tell me, probably leaving this room today, he said, Steve, you may need a haircut. I always wore my hair a little longer. And but my professional career it wasn't much at all, to be honest. 6 years I was able to do it, but it was a wonderful blessing to be able to do it in a period of time. But my best memory is actually in 2010 from golf perspective. Most of my success has happened after I quit playing professionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get a real job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a financial advisor
Mm-hmm.
with American Express, and I guess that's maybe 36 years coming up
Mm-hmm.
in March. And I quit playing, building my practice. Played a little bit with some, and maybe for 10 years or so. Town, my brother and I would play in some 4-balls or scramble, but I just didn't play much. I was just working. But then when I started back playing, and then I really started playing more toward 50 when I turned 50. So Dad, the very first U.S. Senior Open was at Wingfoot, and it was in 1980. And so he never had the opportunity to play senior tour or the regular tour, the senior tour. But he was a good player. He won things, regionally and sectionally.
Mm-hmm.
Had won the different section tournaments. But so he goes up there and plays, and he's at the course, and he's going for a practice round, and he hears somebody, hey sir. And he didn't turn around or whatever, and somebody louder said, sir. He turned around, and it was a USGA official, and he goes, yes sir, what is it? He's going like, what are you doing? He says, I'm playing in the U.S. Senior Open. And he says, you can't carry your bag in the U.S. Senior Open. He had his bag on his shoulder going down the fairway. He said, well, get me a caddy. But he finished 17th in that tournament.
How about that?
And that was pretty impressive.
Sure.
So that was 80. So 30 years later, I qualified for the U.S. Senior Open. And so that's kind of cool. It was out in Seattle at Sahala. And so Gary McCord, he was an analyst, and he was really nice. He followed us around that day. Those guys go on the course because they're going to be talking about shots and, what the greens are and everything. And he just happened to follow them. There was 3 of us, and he fell in our group and just walked with us. And he was really nice and encouraging and everything. And I told him about that story. And then later on, one of my clients had videoed the tournament. And so she got me on a couple different things. And one of them was him saying he told the story about my dad that I'd told him. And I made the cut. Now, I didn't finish 17th, but I made the cut in that U.S. Open as an amateur.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 years as a professional, then I didn't play for a while. Then I started back playing, of course, and got my amateur status back.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lead. Stay tuned for part 2. The Lead, sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC.